Okay, welcome to a Sideways Life podcast. This is season 3, episode 4. I'm Al Elliott. And
I'm Leanne Elliott.
Sorry, talked over you. Sorry. And the whole point of the Sideways Life podcast, as you probably know by now, is to showcase those people who live life a little bit differently, just a little bit sideways. And so today we've got a really, this is actually a rehash. Throwback is the cool word of an episode we did, or an interview I did way back about 2 years ago when we were on Gili Trawangan near Bali, a little island. And so Leanne's going to go back through the interview, and we're going to listen to it again and give our thoughts now 2 years on through the what do they always say when they were being fancy, through the optic, through the lens. That's the word I'm thinking of a sideways life. So Leah, talk us through it.
So it was April 2019. We were lucky enough to spend 4 weeks in Indonesia. We did a few days in Bali, and then we left as soon as possible. And we went to the gorgeous island of Lombok. Bali. Lombok, and then to the Gili Islands, Gili Trawangan and Gili Meno. If anyone has been to that part of the world, you know, you don't need me to say anything. For those of you who haven't, jump online, Google it, look at our Instagram. It is paradise. Mm-hmm. So imagine our surprise when we're on Gili Trawangan and we meet a Canadian couple who have founded their own Tiki Bar on the island.
And then we ended up, we bonded over some music. What was it? Was it the Crash Test Dummies or something?
Was it?
I think so. And we got talking, and they kindly enough agreed that we could go back and do an interview the following day, which we did.
So we did. Well, Al did. So Al spoke to Tommy and Katherine Milburn from Tiki Grove about their lives, their experiences on the island, running a business there. So today we're going to play back some clips from that episode, just to remind ourselves, and as Al said, them through the lens of a Sideways Life commentary, I believe they call it, Alistair.
Is that right?
I don't know.
God, she full named me. She never calls me Alistair.
Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
So our first clip is going to be talking about how they find themselves on Gili Trawangan. It seems like a sensible place to start.
So how did you get here? What's your story of getting here?
Shipwreck. No, we came out here on our honeymoon, and we were fortunate enough to meet an Indonesian that actually lived for years where I grew up in Canada. So we knew a lot of the same people. And Catherine and I, on our honeymoon, were actively looking to leave Canada, live somewhere tropical. And it just worked out that we met Eddie, and he was doing business here, and he was looking for investors. And we started out with him with a totally different business, which is now sold. And it's done. It was a wonderful, wonderful entry to the island. But it opened up a lot of doors for us, and it allowed us to, several years later, open up Tiki Grove.
It's funny how these things sort of happen, that you go on holiday somewhere and then you go, actually, this is where I want to live. Didn't we do the similar thing? When we first started our journey out, looking to move out of the UK, it was about 2009. We went to Nice, France, for my mum's, I won't say what birthday. Sorry, Dijon, yes. I won't say what number birthday is. But we went for a birthday and then just were sitting in the square, reading a newspaper and realising that the local, you get an apartment twice the size of our apartment in Manchester for about €300, and we were paying about £600 at the time for an apartment in Manchester. So it's kind of weird how these things happen, isn't it?
I think you're right, and I think that's where, people started to get an itch, is maybe if they're on holiday or they're just somewhere you think this would be nice, this would be a nice life. And I'm not surprised at all that Tommy and Katherine felt that way on Gili T.
Beautiful place.
Yeah. Gorgeous. So, and in terms of that, Al went on to chat to Tommy and Katherine about the main differences between Bali, Lombok, and the Gili Islands. I think everyone has heard of Bali, understands what it is, what it's like. We hadn't really heard of Lombok. I can't remember if I'd heard the Gilis, maybe, like honeymoon destination type thing.
I think our friend Steph had been to Gili, hadn't she?
Did, yeah, for her honeymoon. So I think it's quite an interesting insight from somebody who lives it. Mm-hmm. If you're considering a trip to Indonesia at some point in the future, and you want to look at Bali, Lombok and Gili, then Tommy's about to explain the main differences.
So, out of interest, what do you think are the main differences between Bali and the Gilis and Lombok?
Well, I think like religion's a big thing for sure. Bali is still Hindu and Buddhism, whereas the rest of Indonesia, I mean, this is the largest Muslim country in the world by population. It's the fourth largest country in the world. It is 90% Muslim. So Bali is kind of that standalone in the middle that retained a different religion. There is still pockets of Christianity and Catholicism and everything else. But yeah, Lombok tends to be very, very Muslim. I've heard more mosques per capita than anywhere in the world. And that doesn't affect the tourism too much. I think the biggest thing is that Bali has had tourism for about 70 years, whereas Lombok has had tourism for about 30, and a mild form of tourism. Gili Trawangan tends to be an extension of Bali, but it's not. It is part of Lombok.
A lot of people think we are part of Bali when they get here, when they arrive.
Because most people go to Bali, and they travel from Bali to get here. But we are Lombok. So it is not Bali. And I just think, yeah, it's just, it's a lot more, I don't know how to say it. It's more laid back here. There's not, tourism's a very new thing out here. Doesn't feel like it when you come to the island, because this island is entirely 100% tourism. But I don't think we're that good at it yet. I think we're getting there. And I think that's part of the charm, is that this place is a little harder to get to than the rest of Bali. It's definitely just, it's a few years behind for sure.
I have to admit, I'd forgotten that I asked that question, and I'd forgotten about the answer. It's, I mean, that's quite incredible that, first of all, it's the fourth largest country in the world. Is that what he said?
Yeah.
I had no idea. Well, obviously, I must have known, but at the time. But yeah, that's pretty impressive. And then obviously the Muslim population was again a bit of a surprise.
Absolutely, and I think as well, it's you're choosing to move to a Muslim country to open a bar. I think that seems somewhat counterintuitive. But funnily enough, that's what you asked him next.
Yeah.
Should we listen to the answer?
Nice segue.
Thank you.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, on Gili Trawangan, we're fairly lucky. They sell beer everywhere here, but
Yeah, it's
Lombok not so much.
Yeah, Lombok. So we're the tourist hub for all of Lombok, even though we're these tiny little islands, and Lombok is just a beautiful place. We are the tourist hub right here. For us to sell plantation rum, or Nusa Kenya, which I talked to you about this the other day, it's an Indonesian rum, but they blend it outside of the country. So to bring it back in, it becomes an import, and it becomes really difficult for them to get it back into the country. So that is something that we deal with. We've got a really good selection right now. Our selection could be so much better if there was consistency in being able to bring the product in. But we don't know if we're going to be able to get some of the products next month. We'll always get something. We just don't know what we'll always be able to get.
And a different price as well.
Yeah,
Prices change all the time.
Yeah. A few years ago, prices tripled overnight. And it was the government saying, we're just doing this for the time being and we'll switch it back. Well, why would anyone switch it back when everyone got used to paying that money? So it is, you come to Asia because you want it to be, people come here because it's cheap. Everything's cheap. But alcohol in Indonesia is not cheap, especially import stuff. It's very expensive. We're from Canada, where import alcohol has so much tax put on top of it that all the Americans across the border think it's insane. Well, here it's even worse. A bottle of Jack Daniels that would be $20 in America would be $50 in Canada is $110 in Indonesia. So it's something you need to think about as a bar owner, that when you're selling cocktails, especially like we do here at Tiki Grove, we've got to figure out a way to price them properly so that people still drink them and enjoy them. But you got to figure out how to make money off of it too.
So that must be really difficult if your spirits cost like 40 times more, 10 times more than it would in another country. And B, you don't know whether you're going to be paying $100 for a bottle of Jack Daniels or $200, depending on the week, on each week.
Definitely. And I think that's what is quite the daunting thing, isn't it, about having a business that somewhere isn't your home country or speak your native tongue. It's navigating changes like that can happen very quickly and very unexpectedly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We actually chatted to Tommy and Katherine a little bit more about what it was like running a business in Indonesia as an expat. So should we have a little listen back to that?
Is it difficult to run a business over here as an expat? Like I know in Thailand, sometimes you can't own property, you have to own it through a national or something.
Yeah, same thing. We own through a local, and that's our friend Eddie, who we were so fortunate to meet, and have someone that you trust. That's the biggest thing. You do hear the nightmare stories about people buying through a local, and the local decides they just want to own it, and you lose your money, and that does happen. It does happen. It doesn't happen a lot, but it does. The nice thing about living on Gili Trawangan is that all the people that have done it before us are really giving with their information. It was one of the things that drew us to this island, was we had questions with no answers. And everyone that was already doing what we wanted to do, they don't hold on to that information. They give it to you freely. They want you to do well. And I think that's one of the biggest things that most of the business owners here understand, is that the business is not Tiki Grove. The business is not Manta Dive. The business is not the Irish Bar. The business is Gili Trawangan. And if we are all doing well, then we all do well. So when Katherine and I came here, not knowing anybody but Eddie, all the expats, which are mostly UK expats, when we came to them and said, who do we talk to for building? Who do we talk to for plumbing? They all had multiple answers, and nobody held back. Everybody wanted us to do well. That was the greatest thing about living here, was just, you told everyone, hey, we're going to commit to this. We're going to do this on this island. And they went, that sounds like a great idea. How can we help you? And that's been the coolest thing. In Vancouver, we always want to help the businesses around us, for sure, but you don't give that information so freely. Whereas here, it's hard to do it. And everyone that's done it here, if they believe in you, they'll give you that information. They'll help you out.
Brilliant.
Yeah. There's no competition on the island. We realize that Gili Trawangan is the business that we need to make the good business. Tiki Grove is secondary. If the island's doing well, we're going to do well.
I mean, the one thing to bear in mind is obviously that Gili Trawangan is, you can walk round it in an hour, can't you?
Yeah, it's teeny tiny.
It's teeny tiny, but there's a lot of competition, I suppose, and it's really heartening to hear that the locals and the expats are helping other businesses to potentially become competitors, even though they don't really see each other as competitors. It is really cool, and one of the things that the three tenets of our Sideways Life is community, remote work, and travel, and that obviously is showing that the community there is pretty amazing.
Absolutely, and I love that. I love that the business is Gili Trawangan, and I think it's such an important thing. The more people that come to the island, the more business there is for everybody. Not one bar can host every tourist. There needs to be different bars and restaurants and places to go. I just think that's such a good philosophy. Share your knowledge, share your information. Don't hoard it. I don't know. I think if you hoard anything, it starts to go stale, doesn't it? You need to put it out there. I also loved at the end of that clip, you could hear the bells. For anyone who hasn't been to the Gili Islands, they're motor free, so no cars. no motorbikes, nothing that is engine powered apart from the boats. So those bells are actually the horses and carriages that are the taxis of the island. So much fun.
Which are fun and also a little bit frightening
In the
at
dark,
times. Yes,
yeah.
they go up little roads which are barely big enough to fit the horse and cart down. And I banged my head as well getting out. So,
You bang your head on everything.
That's true. I think there's a single country we've been to where I haven't banged my head somehow.
Absolutely. So yeah, I love that. I love that about community, and I think that's something that definitely came across speaking to Tom and Catherine was the community. Before we delve into that a little bit more, though, do you remember the founder story on the menus at Tiki Grove?
Something about shipwreck.
Sure is. So we didn't tell this story in our previous podcast, so we'll tell it now so you know what we're talking about. But I think what's really cool about what Tommy talks about here is about creating a brand. You know, it's not just creating a business, it's creating a brand and movement, something for people to follow. So if you're interested in taking a look at it yourself, you'll find it on the Tiki Grove Facebook page. Would you like to read it out, Alan? You have a storytelling voice.
Do I?
Yeah.
I mean, it puts people to sleep.
Yeah.
Tommy was a rum smuggler in the South Pacific. This is Tommy Milburn, the guy who owns, or the co-owns, the bar. So Tommy was a rum smuggler in the South Pacific until one day his ship was caught in a massive tropical storm. When the storm cleared, all that was left was Tommy and a floating cask of his finest rum. After floating for several days, Tommy spotted something on the horizon. As he swam his cask of rum closer, he realized it was a beautiful woman. Catherine was a trader, sailing the South Seas in search of fine spices and tropical foods. Her ship was lost in the same storm, and she spent the last few days floating on a raft of green coconuts and hand-carved tiki god, that had been given to her as a gift by Polynesian islanders. Together they drift for months, quickly learning that in order to survive they needed to be with each other. Then one day they finally spotted it land. They quickly paddled their way to the white sandy shores of Gili Trawangan. But once they were there, they realised they had no money, only the wares they floated in on. So they did what any smart couple whose only worldly goods were fresh coconuts, fine rum and a tiki god would do. They opened a tiki bar, and the rest is history.
I love that.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. It's on every menu, I think. You said that, didn't you? On every menu.
Yeah, it's on the menu as well, yeah.
And it's just cool. Like you say, it's building a brand, and you remember it because you go, oh, these are the guys who had that cool thing on the menu.
Absolutely. It's what you become remembered for. I think it gives people a story to tell when they're, someone asks them, have you been in any cool bars on the island? Like that's the first one that's gonna stand out. And this was no mistake. Tommy and Catherine are savvy business people. So when we asked them about their founder story, this is what they had to say.
Did you just come up with it and sit down and write it after a few rums? What was the story?
No, you know what? The original guys that started tiki bars in the 1930s, there was Don the Beachcomber and there was Trader Vic. And they both created these giant personas behind what they had done. And it was dinner theater. Everything was fake. They created this world that nobody could check up on. And people wanted to believe it. I mean, it's escapism. That's what tiki bars are. It's to take you to the tropics. We're lucky enough that we're in the tropics while we're doing it. But most tiki bars are in concrete jungles in the basement of a hotel. And these guys did that. Don the Beachcomber and Trader Vic created these fake stories, and they stood in their bars saying, I had a ship and I plied the South Seas and I sold rum and traded spices, and they were full of shit. They were completely lying. But it was to the customers don't want to know that you're lying. The customers want to think that this could happen to anybody. And so that's what we did. When we started building our tiki bar, I said, why don't we create our own mythology as well? We're going to do it so tongue-in-cheek that everyone will look at it and go, okay, obviously this isn't real, but God, I wish it was real. So that's what we did. We wrote a story about how we ended up here. That has to do with shipwrecks and floating on a raft of coconuts. And it's all 100% absolutely true.
One of my favourite parts of the interview that I think you can hear the passion in his voice, and he's so knowledgeable about stuff. Like he mentioned two people there, Trader Vic and someone else, and he just mentioned them just off the cuff, and you ask him anything about rum or tiki or history or anything like that, and he's so knowledgeable.
Yeah, they're both so passionate about the business that they've built, the community that they've built it in. Yeah, they're an incredibly inspiring couple, and I think another example of people who would, take the risks and are brave and want to live life a bit differently. So have made it happen. It hasn't just happened. They've worked really hard for that.
And it wasn't without problems either, was it?
No, it's not. Poor. The area of Lombok in Indonesia has been hit so hard over the past few years. It goes without saying the impact of COVID on the tourism industry worldwide has been catastrophic. Before that, Lombok had to deal with the aftermath of the earthquakes. They did make the international news, so I think maybe lots of people have heard of them. But as Tommy explains, they were quickly, what's the right word? Taken out of the news again.
Usurped.
Usurped, yeah, by other stories, which may have been a blessing, as he explains. So should we listen to Tommy's experience of the earthquake?
Well, it was a pretty big deal over here.
It was, absolutely. It did make international news. It was on BBC, it was on CNN. It was a massive earthquake. It was a 7.0. And that's mentioning one. It wasn't just one earthquake, unfortunately. It was a series of earthquakes. We had 2 7.0s. We had at least 20 that were above 6.5. It was a terrible time for this place. Because we are still a little off the beaten path, it got into international news. And a few days later, a bridge collapsed in Italy. And we went out of the headlines, and that went into the headlines. I'll say this very sadly, it was a good thing for us. It took us out of the headlines, and a lot of people don't know what happened here. This industry, this place that we live in, the industry is tourism, and that crushed tourism for months. I mean, we had to close the island for 1 month. There were no fast boats coming to and from. It wasn't safe. It was nonstop aftershocks. It was just not a good place to be. But we need those tourists. We need them back. And this is why I say the bridge collapsing in Italy was obviously horrible for them, good for us, because we left the news cycle right away. And people that were looking at booking a trip 2-3 months down the road didn't know what happened here. So it was a devastating time. It was a terrifying time for everyone who lived here because it just didn't stop. And it's not like bad weather, but you can predict that it's coming. You just didn't know. You'd wake up to it, you'd be having coffee in the afternoon, the ground would start shaking. There was a lot of panicked runs to open spaces. But this island, my God, man, watching this place come back together was just inspirational. All of the expats, all of the locals that live on this island, the government really didn't do much for us at all. We put this place back together. The people that live here, the people that are residents of Gili Trawangan got together and every day put on their running shoes and their work gloves, and they got sledgehammers and went out and started knocking down stuff that needed to get knocked down and supporting things that needed to get supported. And we all threw money into a bucket to get excavators here and trucks. And in less than a month, we got fast boats coming back to this island and bringing customers back to the island. And it was inspirational. It was crazy. You'll see a lot of people on the island have a tattoo. It's the fist, it's the palm tree, and it's the sledgehammer. And it's the rebuilding and the knocking down. And that was what a lot of us got, to say we were here, we did this, we lived through it, we put it back together, and we're back open for business.
I think it's just another example of the amazing community that is on Gili Trawangan. And I mean, you can hear the emotion in his voice when he's talking about this. I mean, it must have been a horrific time. I don't remember seeing it, do you, on the news?
I do remember seeing it. I don't remember reading much detail about it.
I suppose at that point we hadn't really planned to go to Lombok. In fact, we hadn't planned to go to Lombok at all. We went to Bali for potentially like a month, and we ended up leaving after about 3 days and going to Lombok. I remember you telling me I found this island. It's called Lombok. It's over here. Should we have a look? I'm like, yeah, all right then.
Yeah, let's just go for the weekend. We never came back.
No, I mean, I'm sorry people who like Bali, and I'm sorry all the Balinese, but the place we stayed in, Ubud, and also Canggu, neither of those two tickled our pickle. There was a lot of sort of...
it depends what you like.
I think that's right.
You know, if you want to surf, if you want to feel what it's like to live in Melbourne, then, you know, Bali's a really good choice. And that's no disrespect to Bali. It's all Australians. It's a cool place. We didn't vibe with it.
No.
And I think the good news is, if you have been to Bali and felt the same, try Lombok, try the Gilis.
Yeah.
See what you think. And if you do love Bali, great, keep going.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
I think we're probably certainly I'm too old. I'm 45, 44, and I'm not, everyone there, I could have been their dad because they were all there building businesses and wearing sort of skinny T-shirts and stuff, and there's me being old in the corner. So that had an impact, I think, as well.
Sure, yeah. But and I think, again, you know, it's so important, which is why when we change Travellers to a sideways life, it's the three pillars that make any life worth living, but particularly one that is a little less conventional. It's about having work you're passionate about. It's about doing it in a place or being able to travel to places that you fall in love with, and being part of a community that is inspiring and something bigger than you. And I think we felt that, in Lombok and Gili Tea, the friendliness, the warmth of the community, and I think that's really important.
Great. Have you got any more from Tommy and Katherine?
Well, if you want to go back and listen to the full episode, you will hear a couple more things there that we've not talked about today. They talk a little bit more about what it's like to be an expat, what an expat life is like in that part of the world. And if you are burning to know the answer to the question, is rum the next gin, then jump to about 8 minutes 17 and you'll hear the answer to that.
Brilliant. Okay, I think is that everything for today?
Yeah, that's our throwback to our interview with Tommy and Katherine and spending some time on Gili Trawangan. And hopefully, if anyone is aspiring to live a similar expat life, we've given you some ideas.
Yeah, so it's possible, and even through earthquakes. And we spoke to him recently, actually, and he did say that the pandemic has obviously affected business massively, but everyone's still pulling together on the island and they're doing the very best they can. And he says that he's well and looking forward to opening up for business again. So, so if you are going that way, make sure you go to Gili Trawangan and you go to the Tiki Grove, because it is such a fantastic place. Oh, and get the fish tacos.
Oh my God, we haven't even talked about the food in Tiki Grove.
So amazing. Fish tacos, and get Timmy, why was that Timmy? Sorry, get Tommy to pick out a rum for you. There's a couple that he recommends that are neat, and they are lovely.
Definitely. And if you want to have a little sneak peek at the menus, you will find them on their Facebook page, which is Tiki Grove Gili Trawangan.
Brilliant. Okay, so I think that's all for.
Oh, they're on Instagram as well.
Oh, are they?
Yeah.
As Tiki Grove? Or?
Tiki Grove, yeah. Yeah.
We'll put a link to it.
Yeah, I think it's Tiki Grove.
Talking of links, then, we have a new website called asidewayslife.com. We're going to put this podcast and all of the links we talked about on there. So you just go to asidewayslife.com and you should be able to see a link to the podcasts, and that will have all the links we talked about today. You have a plea, don't you, or a question or a request around reviews?
If you're looking for something to do, if you've got a spare 10 minutes, maybe you're waiting for someone to get out the shower, you're waiting for, you've got a slow boiling kettle and you're waiting for it to boil. If your washing machine is on its final spin and there's no point going back to what you were doing, because in 3 minutes you're going to have to come back down and empty it, then why not leave a review on a Sideways Life podcast? A nice one, if that's okay. If you've not enjoyed listening to this, then I'd just wait for your washing machine to finish.
Yeah,
told.
I wouldn't bother leaving a review.
No.
So you need to go to iTunes and leave a review there. Make it as positive. Make it, if you can, please make it positive. And don't just go, it was good. Please put a couple of sentences on there, what you liked. And subscribe, and make sure that you download the next episodes, because we've got some really, really good ones coming up, which we're really, really proud of. So we'd love to have you here as a listener.
Love to.
So I think that's all for today, isn't it?
Yeah. Do we need to talk about who we're chatting to next week?
No,
Okay,
because
then.
it's not finalised yet.
Then I think we're done here.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
I should probably confirm them, shouldn't I?
Maybe. Where are they penciled in for?
Can't remember.
You should probably look it out.
I should look into that.
You're not in charge of booking people in.
I know. Why did you let me do that?
I didn't. You went rogue.